Hello everyone, and welcome back to another graphics cards troubleshooting slash possibly repair video. Now this is a GTX 760 that was described as no picture. I can already say that that's probably wrong, because I already tried to fire the card up and I can tell that it does in fact put out a picture. There's something else with this card that's a bit wrong, which might be a small or just or a bigger issue. I don't know yet, but yeah, let's just pretend I didn't try to fire this up already and we don't know what this card is, like it just arrived, and we just have the seller description for this, which you shouldn't generally trust. So, first things, I would always take the card apart and just like check for physical things. Usually you should do that when you when you buy a card, when you get one sent, then, well, but when you buy a card from eBay, you should always check the images for physical damage already. But sometimes they don't give you the an image for the right part of the card, and the price is still very cheap, so you go for it anyway. So yeah, I like to do a physical check first. Some people like to not take the card apart unless it's absolutely necessary to save time. I can understand that if you work on a lot of cards. I personally prefer to still take the card apart and just take a look at it. That thermal paste is not factory, which also explains why the screws were so loose. Okay, fairly standard looking PCB. This is actually a very similar PCB to the GTX 970 from Palette that we looked at. Which, I mean, Palette, a lot of the times Palette just uses very, I need to get pliers for that. Be right back. Yeah, what I was meaning to say is a lot of the time Palette uses some very, very reference-like PCBs. They don't really modify them a lot. Same goes for GameWatt. So this PCB right here, you see a lot. This is a PCB that's been reused many, many times. Same you can kind of see for the 30 series. There's like the newly launched 3050. There's some PCBs that are literally just 3070 PCBs with like phases missing and memory modules spots empty because they reused that PCB. I really do not like push pins. Okay, let's that still looks alright. Yeah, you have a fairly standard medium power GPU 4-phase, 2-phase memory. On EVGA cards, this would probably not have had a heatsink, and the one high-side MOSFET there would probably have blown up. But this is an OEM, well, I can tell by that product number that it's made by MSI, but this is like from a pre-build, hence the red PCB. And also, this doesn't have the full 256-bit memory bus. There's only 6 memory modules on this. Usually you would see 8. So this is a 192-bit bus version of the GTX 760. It's interesting, I didn't know this one existed. Anyway, let's actually get into our first step of troubleshooting. So, we get out a multimeter, we put it into diode mode, and we would check our power inputs. We have one 6-pin here. There's a possibility to have a second one, but it doesn't exist on this card. So we have one 6-pin, which provides 12 volts, and we have the PCI Express slot, which provides 12 volts on the first 3 pins left, and 3.3 volts on the 4th pin from the right. So let's ground ourselves. Actually, I like to use this tab. And let's check one of the first 3 pins on the left, which is fine. Then let's check 3.3 volts. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's also fine. And let's check 12 volts on the 6 pin. That's also fine. So we don't have any shorts on our power inputs. And now we measure. Now we go into resistance mode, and now we can measure some of our resistances to check out if maybe we have a weird resistance somewhere. So let's check the memory. That looks fine, a bit on the high side, but we don't have many memory modules on here, so that is fine. And then our core, that's also completely fine. Also a bit high for what I've seen from GK104s, which is the core on this card, but this is one of the lowest tiers of GK104 that you can get, which means this has a lot of its cores deactivated. And, well, if there's less things in parallel in the core, of course your resistance goes up. Then, this up here should be the PEX rail. I think that is the output. That kind of looks like the output, and that resistance is also fine. We seem to have a 5-volt low drop-off regulator here. Let's just check which the pinout of those seems to change. Okay, that one's probably 12 volts. That one's ground. And this one is also not, okay, like, there's two outputs that are not shorted to ground in any way, so our 5 volts output is probably fine. This is the BIOS chip. Here's a PWM controller for vCore. We have one power shunt right here and an INA 219. They forwent the INA 3221 here, probably because there's no second 6-pin and there's no reason to use a 3-channel power monitoring chip. There's another INA 219 in the power shunt here for the PCI Express slot. We do not have an input inductor. Yeah, we just have 0 ohm resistors in the place where an input inductor would be. Same here. Oh, actually here, this one doesn't exist because that would probably be on the second 6-pin. Okay, we would have liked to see fuses here instead of 0 ohm resistors. Oh, well, these 0 ohm resistors sometimes effectively act as fuses because they burn out once too much current flows through them, but I would have liked to see proper fuses here because, yeah, there's like no cost. You're already foregoing the input inductors. You could have just put fuses there. Okay, then that is probably everything to measure on the card. Let's take a closer look if we can see anything. Missing components, damaged traces. Not really. There's a fair bit of dust on here, but it's not too much. I've seen worse. The bypass capacitors look also good. There's a bit of cardboard here. The backside is a bit dusty. So this is a candidate for just being cleaned. I've had this more than once actually, that a card was a non-detect or was behaving weirdly, and once I cleaned the card everything was perfectly fine. So this is a candidate for maybe just having weird intermittent issues, and once cleaned this one might just work because there's no backplate on this. It just goes like this. It's like it's an OEM card. It is intentionally very low cost because like they save the price of 2 memory modules here. It doesn't even have the DisplayPort output. Like this is basically the cheapest you can make a GTX 760. Anyway, yeah, let's put the card back together. Put some new thermal paste on. And let's try to power it up. Okay, the card is installed in the system, in the new test bench in fact. This is now a very nice Diagnostic ECB3 test bench, no longer the old Cooler Master case on the side. So yeah, the card's installed, and as I said before, I kind of pre-tested this already. The card does put out an image, however, the HDMI slot seems to be dead. I only tried to boot the card there once, but I did not get a picture there. So the HDMI slot might actually be dead, which makes the card symptoms consistent with no image, which is how the card was described, but over DVI we get a picture just fine. And as you can see, the card also shows up as a 192-bit version of the GTX 760 with 1.5 gigs of VRAM, not 2 gigs, which is what we normally expect. And we have all 16 PCI Express lanes, and yeah, it's an MSI card, as I suspected. However, one thing I want to test is if we can actually run high load, because that's something I had some issues with when I was testing the card before making the video. Because, well, now it's not doing it. Yeah, it's not doing it now, or at least not in this test. So, one thing that happened is that the card would boot in 16x, and I would try to launch 3D Mark then. This test doesn't seem to have any issues with it. So let's actually just start 3D Mark and see if the issue reappears, or if it was just a one-off. Because what would happen in 3D Mark is the card would actually fail to even start the test. Like, the system would freeze, and I would have to press the reset button to bring the card back. And then the card would boot back up at 1 PCI Express lane, not 16. And then it would run tests just fine. So what this tells me is, well, I'm just gonna come back to the... Oh yeah. The card froze. Okay, it still is doing it, so you can see... Oh, yeah. So something is happening with the card, and if I press now reset and let it boot back up, I did run mats, by the way, it passed, which might be another angle. The card might have might have memory problems that are too minor for mats to detect, and I might actually have to run mods, which is a more in-depth version of it, which I currently do not have an install of. But if I suspect that that's the case, I will sit down and learn how to do mods properly. But yeah, if we now look in GPU-Z, we will probably see... Oh no, it still came back at 16. Okay, yeah. But the card really doesn't like running 3D Mark. It runs the render test and Heaven just fine. It really doesn't like 3D Mark. So, what this behavior... Well, it's not entirely consistent. As you can see, we did come back at 16 lanes and not 1. But what this behavior kind of tells me is that either one of our bypass capacitors on PCIe is like damaged or non-functional, and the data line is just very unstable, and that's why we lose data lanes when we try to like push a lot of load through the PCI Express interface. Or the bypass capacitors are fine and we just have dust somewhere. As I said, I've already had cards that would either not display an image or like behave weirdly, and once I cleaned those cards, they were fine. So this might be another one, given that it is a bit dusty and it doesn't have a backplate, and the the V-core controller is on the back and has a lot of resistors around it. If there's a bit of dust there that might be messing with resistors, that could explain some weirdness. Maybe this card is hitting overcurrent protection. Well, actually it shouldn't be, because the fan stays at low speed. And now it runs Firestrike, so it is fairly intermittent. Like, you saw it freeze up, and now it runs Firestrike. I will clean the card, and if after that the card is consistent, then I will call it I'm not really calling it a repair. To call it a repair, I require to be something to be soldered. We didn't solder anything here. We just took the card apart, took a look at it, took some measurements, everything checked out. And now the card is just being a bit weird in Windows. So I'm gonna clean the card. If after that the card is fine and consistent and works as it should be, I'm calling it a fix. If not, there's more things to diagnose. I will probably try to run mods on the card, which I first have to set up, and I might be doing another a more detailed physical inspection of the card. Yeah, but I am kind of feeling that it's just a bit of dust, given that I already had this. I'm gonna see Firestrike finish. I'm gonna take a look at the score and see if the card is scoring right. Because sometimes it shows 16x, but you're actually at 1x. And in that case, your score would just be really low. I don't actually know what score to expect from this, but well, a GTX 580 is at around 4,000 points, I think. And a 680, which uses the same core as this, just the fully built one, is around, I think, 7,000 points. So this one I should be at around 5,000, 6,000 points for the GPU score. If it's a lot lower, well, it will tell us if we are like lower than average, actually, because Testbench does have a LAN cable plugged in now. I did not have that before. So we will see if something's off. I don't know if it's gonna differentiate between a normal 760 and the 192-bit version that we have here, though. Because of the lower memory bus and the lower VRAM, this will perform worse than a normal 760. Especially because of the bandwidth. Even if you don't need the full 2 gigs, your bandwidth is still worse. Yeah. That is a bit underwhelming. It's not so bad that I would say something is wrong with the card. It does detect it as 192-bit. But our score is a bit low. Yeah. This is still higher than like... This is high enough so that I can say it's probably fine. Like, if we max the power limit and like max the fan speed and overclock the card a bit, it would probably perform better. But yeah, I will just clean the card now, test it again, and then see if our intermittent issues disappear or if there's still something more to be diagnosed. Okay, so sadly it didn't work out. As you can see, we have a code 43 and some artifacting on the desktop. So this sadly isn't a card that you just clean and it works. I mean, it intermittently works. It ran benchmarks for a bit, but now we have a code 43, which leads me to believe that we do actually have a problem with a memory bank here. So let's try restarting. I'm gonna run maths again now it like actually artifacts. It wasn't artifacting before. So I'm gonna load into maths, see if maybe it finds something now. And if it doesn't, I guess I'll have to sit down and learn how to use mods. Sometimes it gets stuck here. I have a feeling it's getting... No, actually it doesn't. It does something. Okay, it works. We're not seeing something super obvious. So, if it's a memory bank here, then it's probably... Oh no, there we have some artifacts actually. So let's see who's the culprit. Yeah, okay. Let's go back into Windows and read the report for that. I probably crashed loading the driver there. Keyboard and mouse lighting is off, and we have Yeah, it's artifacting again. Okay. Report. Okay. There we have a problem. Not that many write errors, but still write errors. On that should be the so let's yeah. So here on the wall is the GTX 970, which is a very similar PCB as you can see. This one was a no fix. It's on my wall because it's dead. So I will reconfirm this, but as far as I know, okay, now it's really artifacting. Oh damn. Yeah, this gonna crash soon. Anyway, you can kind of see what it says. There's a 31.0 and there's a 6332 bank. As far as I know, this is the 6332. This is the 31.0. So this one, that for some reason is marked on this card as well, is dead. And it is freaking out really, really hard now. Yeah, I will shut this down. And yeah, so we have a diagnosis for our card. I don't know why it didn't show up before. Maybe because this card, like, usually I don't wait very long when I get a card. So I got this card, I unboxed it, and immediately went to going through my diagnosis thing. And I did pre-test this card, as I said. So maybe because it was like really, really cold from being outside, it kind of had like a mini thermal shock effect. You see, when like people heat gun their cards, that's essentially what they're doing. They like give the card a thermal shock, and then you might have some things realign that were broken before, but as you can see, that doesn't hold for very long. So maybe that, like you can do it with extreme heat, you can also do it with extreme cold, and it's very cold outside right now. Or the card is just really intermittent, and yeah, I don't know. The diagnosis now is that one memory bank is dead. And yeah, so that's the diagnosis. As said in previous videos, I do not currently swap out memory banks. I am planning to learn how to do it in the future, but I'm currently missing some equipment for that. And until that arrives, I will not be able to swap memory banks. So for now, this is going to be the end of the video. We've diagnosed the card, we have found a dead memory module, and that memory module needs to be replaced, which I can't do right now. So once I have the ability to do that, there's probably maybe gonna be a part 2 of this card, and then we have it work just fine. Hopefully it's just one bank. This is probably just a memory issue, not a memory controller issue. So yeah, this one's going onto the pile of all the cards that need new memory banks that I currently can't fix, which there's quite a lot of those. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Sadly, we don't have a fix today, just a diagnosis. So yeah, still though, we have a very conclusive diagnosis. We know exactly what's wrong with the card, we know what to do. So yeah, I hope you could learn something, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and until next time. So goodbye. I want to make a small addition to the diagnosis of the card. As you can see, it's not artifacting now, and it's in fact running a benchmark. I've frozen the scene so that you can take a look at the FPS numbers, because this card is not as straightforward as I thought at first, because it seems to be alternating between a state of obviously artifacting and having an obvious memory problem, and seemingly working like this, but then after a while beginning to stutter and then eventually crash, and then restarting and picking one of the two states that we observe the card in. So this changes the diagnosis for the card slightly from obvious memory fault to intermittent. I, however, think that the root cause of the problem remains a memory chip that is not obviously completely faulty, but still faulty, so that it does create errors. And maybe depending on operating temperature of the memory chip or how stressful a certain scene is, this could change how the fault is expressed in the card. Because as you can see, it's running now, the FPS are actually stable at around 55. So it takes quite a while to crash, so I guess you're gonna have to take my word for it in order to not have this video be too long. But I think I wanted to add this because the card does sometimes seemingly work for quite some time, and then suddenly it loses performance and then just crashes, and sometimes even forces a full system reboot. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Video ends now.